All right, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the show author, keynote speaker, performance coach, basketball coach, all around great guy, Alan Stein Jr. Thank you for coming on, man.
Oh my goodness, it's my pleasure. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, this is so we're pretty young in our podcast journey, and you were what we would call a stretch goal, and to have you come on this early on in our journey is just a blessing, man. So thank you very much. I know we have a mutual friend, so shout out to Rich for putting us together. But I'm looking forward to our talk today.
I am as well. This will be a lot of fun, and I'm just a huge fan of the podcasting space in general. I've hosted 3 separate podcasts in my journey over the last decade, and have probably put out close to 1,000 episodes. And then I've been a guest on almost 400 different shows in the last 5 or 6 years. So I know how meaningful and impactful these conversations can be, and I'm looking forward to diving in. I know you've got some great topics and things we want to unpack.
That's absolutely right, man. I appreciate that. So the first thing I always like to do with our guests is give you a chance to tell your story, because there's so much richness just in your own journey. And I'll leave that where you want to go. You can start as a player, but I know a lot of people are going to be interested in your work as a performance coach and then transitioning into what you do now.
Sure. Well, I'll give kind of a Cliff Notes version, and then if there's any strings you want to pull on and have me elaborate on, I'll be happy to do that. But for the context of your listeners, basketball was my first love, and I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And I'm so thankful that here, as I approach 50 years old, basketball is still a very important pillar of my life. I spent the first portion of my life as a very dedicated basketball player. I played at a public high school here in the Washington, D.C. area where I still reside, was able to play collegiately at Elon. It was Elon College at the time. It's now Elon University down in North Carolina. And towards the latter part of high school and throughout my career at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for what we now call performance training. At the time, it was just called strength and conditioning, but that title has expanded as folks in those roles do more than just help players get strong and get in good shape. But I started to fall in love with performance training. And when I graduated from Elon, and it was clear to me that I didn't have what it would take to play the game professionally, I decided to become a basketball performance coach, because I figured what could be better than combining my original love of basketball with this newfound love of performance training. So to me, that was the only thing worth pursuing. And I dove headfirst into that, moved back here to the DC area and started my own training company, chose to focus mostly on middle school and high school age players because that was the demographic I felt I could have the biggest impact on, not only on the court, but more importantly, off the court as well as a role model. I was able to work at 2 really renowned high schools here in the DC area, Montrose Christian, which is where Kevin Durant graduated from, and DeMatha Catholic High School, which has had a whole host of NBA players. And my work at those 2 schools, both of which were Nike elite schools, led to opportunities with Nike basketball and with Jordan Brand and with USA basketball. So I had a very unique vantage point where I was able to work very closely with many of the best high school players in the country, but then I was also able to work events and be a fly on the wall and learn from guys like Kobe Bryant and Steph Curry and LeBron James and Steve Nash. So I was able to see what it took for a player to climb to that elite level, but then I was also able to see firsthand what it took to stay at that elite level and maintain excellence. And I did that for just shy of 20 years before deciding to make the very distinct pivot to leave the basketball training space in 2017 and pursue a full-time career as a keynote speaker and author, which is what I do now.
That's awesome, man. And I think that, like you said, there's so many strings that we can pull from that. And one of them that comes to mind right away is, a lot of people that are in the training space now, their dream would be to work with NBA players. That's like what they would love. Can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between working with those elite of elite and that beauty and the purity of working with middle school and high school?
Well, there's a lot more similarities than there are differences. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're talking about a young middle school player who's just learning the game, or you're talking about an established NBA veteran that's played for 12 years, both are human beings and needed to be treated as such. Both love the game of basketball, and the premise of the game of basketball doesn't change no matter what level you're on. I mean, in order to be a good player, you need to be able to shoot, pass, defend, handle the ball, and rebound. I mean, the skills and the objective of the game don't change. Certainly, as you progress up, the athleticism, the skill level, the toughness and grit, the conditioning, that stuff will heighten and escalate as you matriculate up levels. But really, most of the fundamentals don't change. And that's really the epicenter of what I preach to corporate groups now, but it's absolutely what I preached in the basketball world, was working on the fundamentals. As Kobe once taught me, never getting bored with the basics, working relentlessly towards a handful of fundamental concepts in any area of your life. And even though I'm in the corporate space now, everything that I teach and I share, whether on stage or on page, comes through that same lens of what I learned in the game of basketball. Figure out what the fundamentals are and work towards mastery of them during the unseen hours. That's really the key to being, elite in any area or any craft. But, now when we look at some of the differences, the way I would communicate with or communicate to a middle school age player would have some nuanced difference than the way I would communicate, to a 30-year-old NBA player. So it's not that everything is identical, but to be honest, the big rocks and the big pillars are very, very similar. And I always understood that. And, in any relationship, in any coach to player or teacher to student type relationship, there needs to be mutual trust. There needs to be mutual respect. You need to be honest, yet still be compassionate. One of the traits that makes for an excellent basketball player is learning how to blend confidence with humility. Earn the right to be confident on the court because you've put in the work during the unseen hours, but still be humble enough to be open to being coached and open to feedback. And no matter how good you get, humble enough to know you can still get better. There's so much that goes into that. But for me, the key was showing up for that middle school age player with the same effort and energy that I would show up for an NBA player. And anyone listening that aspires to work with NBA players, the best advice I can give you is start where you are. Like wherever you are right now, you need to treat that like it's the NBA. If you're working with a group of 10-year-olds, you show up to every workout and every practice with the same heart, soul, and love that you'd like to have if you have an opportunity to work with NBA players. It can't be, I'll do that when. Like you need to start where you are now and do a great job with whoever you're working with, and that will earn you opportunities to be able to do other things. I mean, when I was in the basketball training space and let's say working the Nike Skills Academies or the McDonald's All-American game, young upcoming performance coaches would say, well, hey, I want to do that. And I'd say, awesome, you should. It's fantastic. But don't ask me what I'm doing now. You need to ask me what I was doing 5 years ago that led to this opportunity. And same thing for players. If you want to be a college player in 4 or 5 years from now, then you need to start behaving like that at present. You need to start developing the mindset and the attitude and the habits of a college player when you're in 8th and 9th grade in order to have a chance to play college basketball. Because if you wait to start doing those things until you're in college, it'll be too late.
That's awesome, man. And you're right. It's all of those things are transferable beyond the game of basketball. It happens in business, happens in family. Yes. And I love how as performance people, we have the same responsibility of the thing that we're teaching, right? So if we're teaching them to give it their all when there's unseen hours, we have to do the same thing. And that middle school practice is an unseen thing relative to working with an NBA pro. What do you say in staying in that youth space? How do you approach it when someone's goals don't match their work? Is it just a matter of blunt directness? How do you measure that ability of not bursting a bubble, but at the same time making sure someone hears what it takes?
Yeah, well, you just brought up a really beautiful point, and that is your behaviors and your beliefs need to be in alignment. Your goals and your habits need to be in alignment. Using the example we said before, if you're in 9th grade and your goal is to play college basketball, that is a wonderful goal. And anyone listening to this of that age, I want you to go after it with everything you've got. But your daily behavior and your choices and your mindset and your habits need to be in alignment with playing college basketball. You can't say I want to play college basketball and then make the choice to rarely work out or give a good effort or, play video games all night or, go to the movies and skip practice. Those behaviors are not in alignment with being a college player. So when those things are in misalignment, and I always say this with a smile, then you need to change one of those two things. You either need to change your behavior and your habits and your approach to be in alignment, or you need to lower your goal. And I always say that with a smile because no one ever wants to lower their goal,
Right.
which means the only part of that equation that they can change is their habits. In other words, if you want to be a college player, you need to act as if you are a college player now. You need to treat your body right. You need to study the game to raise your IQ. You need to work on your skills. You need to know your role. You need to be a good leader. You need to do all of those things to give yourself a fighting chance for that opportunity. And once again, this principle is very high utility. Any goal that anyone can set, you need to make sure that your behavior is in alignment with that. And if it's not, then you have to change one of those two things because nothing else is possible.
That's awesome. And it's a great segue to the question I have for you to go back to your story a little bit, which is, okay, so now you're having success. You're having success at that youth level, then you have success working with pros. You're one of the more renowned performance coaches before it became a boom where everyone was one. And so at what point do you say, man, I think I can do this on stage. I think I can write books. I think I can become a thought leader in this space and go beyond basketball?
I remember it vividly. I had an opportunity to work the NBA Top 100 camp. The NBA Players Association would put a camp on every summer, and they would invite the top 100 high school players, and then they would bring in tons of current and former NBA players and coaches to help mentor them and show these young people what it would take to play at the NBA level. And as I was working that event as a performance coach, they brought in a keynote speaker, a motivational speaker named Walter Bond. Who's still an internationally renowned speaker to this day. And Walter was amazing. I mean, he talked to our group for about 40 minutes, and he just took us on an emotional journey. And that 40 minutes, he had this group of alpha males, the best of the best in the game of basketball. He had this group laughing. He had us crying. He had us thinking. He was a masterful storyteller. He was funny. He was charming, but he delivered very practical, relevant lessons and nuggets. And I remember sitting there in that audience that day and just thinking to myself, like, I want to do that one day. Like, this guy, Walter, is remarkable. I mean, this was my version of maybe becoming a rock star one day. This guy was phenomenal. And I thought, I want to do that one day. I don't want to do it now. I love the basketball performance training I'm doing, but I want to do that one day. So a seed was planted. Well, fast forward over a decade, I started to experience some early signs of burnout. I'd been in the basketball performance training space for almost 20 years, and I was starting to get burned out on being in the weight room and being on the court, helping players improve their athleticism. I loved players and I loved coaches, but I just wasn't in love with the performance aspect the way I had been years prior. And because I have so much respect and admiration for players and coaches and for the game itself, I knew that I couldn't just keep going if it wasn't something that I was all in for. Coaching is not something that you can mail it in. You owe it to the people that you're working with to be there in mind, body, and spirit. And I found my interest starting to wane. So I decided to take a leap and a very distinct pivot and try and make that seed that had been planted by Walter bloom. And I decided to become a corporate keynote speaker, a motivational speaker, if you will, and figured this is my time. It's time to leave something that's been really good to me for 2 decades, but that I'm starting to experience burnout in. And it's time for me to try something that I think I know I would enjoy, but I think I could be fairly decent at. And it all started because of that seed Walter planted. And, I just think that's really neat now as a speaker, that I don't fully understand or recognize or realize the seeds that I may be planting with my work, that someone may read my book and take a lesson from that. And it really has an impactful, it's impactful in their life. So I don't take any of it for granted. I'm incredibly grateful to do the work that I do. I love what I do. If you can't sense that from my level of energy right now. But yeah, it all started from Walter planting that seed. And I've been doing this for 6 years now, and it is invigorating. It's electric. I take my craft very seriously. I want to be the best keynote speaker that I'm capable of, and be able to plant seeds and light candles for as many people as I can. But yeah, it's an amazing journey, and I owe it all to my roots in basketball. I mean, the game has been very, very good to me and has afforded me some incredible opportunities, and I'm just so grateful.
I want to ask you, and probably selfishly, about the process of watering that seed, but I can't do that yet until I ask you to go back to what you said about the signs of burnout. I think that is so huge, to be able to, one, recognize it, and then two, actually pivot without losing a sense of identity. And I just want to share with you really quick, because the reason why it stuck out with me is I struggle with that, right? So I've been coaching youth basketball for 20 plus years, and uh, you know, I didn't want to admit it, that I was tired of going to Iowa to coach 8, 10 games in a weekend. Because it was such a big part of my identity in my 20s and my 30s. And so how did you do that? How did you admit it without beating yourself up that you're not being what you were when you started?
That's such a great and insightful question. And I think that's really, you just highlighted the major thorn that's in most people's paws that are experiencing that. Is one, there's usually a lack of awareness. They don't realize that that's what it is that they're experiencing. And it's so important for folks to understand that awareness is always the first step to improvement. Always. Because you'll never improve something you're unaware of, and you'll never fix something that you're oblivious to. So until you're even aware of the fact that you're experiencing burnout, nothing's going to change. And then when you're aware of it, the next step, as you just brilliantly pointed out, you have to be, have the courage, because it does take courage to admit it and to acknowledge it, and to give yourself some grace and some compassion, and saying, I don't love what I'm doing near as much as I used to. And I want to lift up the hood and start to figure out why. I need to ask myself some important questions, because, there's a variety of things that can help improve the initial onset of burnout, aside from changing vocations completely. Just some things that come to the top of my head. If you're getting burnt out in the coaching world, maybe switching from coaching boys to coaching girls, maybe switching from coaching middle school to coaching high school, maybe switching from being a head high school coach to a college assistant, maybe, or any of those in reverse, but maybe changing the environment or who you're coaching might spark a new love, or relight that fire. It could also be you go from being more of a team coach to saying, I want to be an individual skills trainer, or a mental performance coach, or I want to do strength and conditioning. So you leave what it was you were coaching to do a different aspect of coaching. So there's some other things that one can try. Or in my case, I decided to leave coaching basketball players on the court to now coaching sales professionals and executives, in business. So I still consider what I'm doing to be very similar to what I did. I just changed my audience and I changed the modality. But, if you asked me what label I most identify with, it's still coach. Yes. I mean, people call me keynote speaker and author, but that's really what I do. That's not who I am. To my core, I am a coach. I've just chosen to coach a different group of people in a different industry in a different way than I used to. So all of those things are things to consider if you're starting to experience burnout. And for me, the signs of burnout were I wasn't enjoying what I was doing near as much as I had in years past. Like going to the gym or going to the weight room started to feel more like a chore than it did a joy. So that was a red flag. Another red flag was I wasn't near as curious or fascinated with my work as I had been in years past. Like I wasn't that excited about learning a new exercise or a new drill or a new set and rep technique. I was much more fascinated with things like leadership and culture and accountability. So my interests started to shift a little bit. And as I said, I have so much reverence and respect for players and for coaches and for the game of basketball that I just wouldn't allow myself to keep doing something that I wasn't all in with, since I knew that I was going to have to kind of mail it in and just kind of go through the steps. And I didn't believe in doing that. I felt like I'd be cheating the game and I would be cheating myself. So that was why I made the shift, because, you know, most people that do something at a high level for a certain period of time can put on the cruise control, and most people won't even know. But I would know, and that was what was most important. So that was another reason for, you know, deciding to make that pivot and shift. And, you know, I did so by giving myself permission to feel how I was feeling. It's very understandable for someone experiencing that, and you kind of alluded to it, to have some feelings of shame or guilt. Like, you know, it wasn't lost on me that I had built a really good career and I had some amazing opportunities working with renowned players. I got to travel the world. And it wasn't that I was saying that I was ungrateful for those things, or that that wasn't good enough, or I'm sure something else is better. I just simply didn't love it as much. And that was why I needed to make the change. But I did go through a very small window of thinking, you know, who am I to leave something that's this good? Like, who am I to think that something else could be more fulfilling for me at this point in my life? But thankfully, I was able to work through that quickly, give myself permission to feel burned out and to make a change. And I'm so glad that I did. And I was able to make that transition fairly quickly and fairly successfully. And it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made.
I love that level of honesty, man. And I think that it's worth pointing out the correlation between how you started and how you pivoted, which means that you were so used to, the habit was to give it your all, so that it was so much more recognizable when it wasn't. Even if it was down from 100 to 96, it's like more recognizable because you know what 100 feels like. Whereas if you had the habit of saying, hey, this is not an NBA player, this is just a middle schooler, so I'm going to coast through this workout. When you're coasting later, you wouldn't even recognize it.
Yes. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And that's such an important point. And I have that same approach now in the speaking world. You know, it's, I try and be incredibly consistent in everything that I do. I want to show up as the best version of myself, fully prepared, having done all of the work in the unseen hours to be of service to the audience. And it doesn't matter if that audience is 4,000 people or if it's 40 people. It doesn't matter if it's for a Fortune 100 brand or a small mom and pop company that no one's ever heard of. Either way, it is my job to show up as my best self to be of service to that audience. And that is something that I learned through the game of basketball. It doesn't matter if it's a middle school player or an NBA player. You have to give them your best. And I'm going to follow this same recipe at present. I mean, right now, I love being on stage. There are very few places I'd rather be than in front of an engaged audience that I get to share the things that I'm most passionate about. But I can tell you for certain, if 5, 10, 15 years from now, I start to feel burned out in the speaking world, I will make the exact same pivot to go do something different, because I owe that to the audience. You know, I owe that to the meeting planners and the corporate clients that hire me. You know, they deserve my best. And if there's ever a point in my life where I don't feel like giving my best, then I need to find something else to do. So yeah, what I learned transitioning from basketball to business, I will hold tried and true if and when I decide to make another pivot at some point in my life. But of course, I can't see that at present because I love what I'm doing so much at present. But, 5, 10, 20 years from now, might be time to make a change. Who knows?
That's so cool, man. And it's tempting to let that be the answer to my next question, but I want you to be a little bit more practical in your advice with this, because I think conceptually we understand for the speaking, to be the best speaker, you have to take the same approach you took as a performance coach. But can you get into, and I'm asking this one selfishly because you're ahead of where I want to be. You've planted a seed for me as a professional,
Awesome.
and so give me some practical advice. How do we go about, those of us who have done a great job coaching and have a decent reputation, how do we practically make that pivot to getting on more stages, getting our material on pages? Give us some advice.
Sure. Well, I'll share exactly what I did, and then anyone listening can apply that to their situation, because I do believe there are macro principles and lessons that can be applied to a variety of different areas. So when I decided to make that leap, the very first thing I did was I reached out to about a dozen people, friends and former teammates and just people that I knew that were currently working in what we'll just call the corporate space, that were working in business. Because up until that point, I'd never had a corporate job in my life. I mean, I was always in the training space. So I reached out to them and just asked them a variety of different questions under the umbrella of, what are the things in business that are your biggest pain point right now? From not from a profit and loss standpoint or a customer experience standpoint, but from a leadership and communication and culture standpoint, since those were my areas. What are the things that are most difficult for you in your business? And, this ranged from people that were working in Fortune 500 companies to people that had small startups, but thankfully, they were very honest in their feedback, and they would start to let me know, these are the things that are most difficult for us, role clarity and accountability and communication. And, we have some selfishness, which hurts collaboration. We have team members that don't have great habits and don't have great focus or mindset. So they just started sharing all of the things that were challenging to them. And I started to notice some trends, and I started to look at each of those individual pillars. And then I thought, all right, well, these are areas that I believe I can add value to. The things that I learned from elite level basketball players and coaches, I think I can share some of those stories and lessons to help folks in these areas. So the first thing I did was make sure there was a need for my message. Then the next thing I did, I leaned on that same group and I asked, would there be an opportunity for me to come speak to your team? You don't have to pay me. I just need to start getting in reps. If it's cool, I'd love to be able to film it so I can go back and watch to see how I'm doing at the craft of speaking. But can you bring me in to speak? And it doesn't need to be this big annual sales kickoff. You get 10 people together in a break room during lunch. If you'll let me speak to them, I'll be there, because I just need to get reps. Again, coming from the basketball world, I've always had placed a massive value on repetition.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get good at any skill, whether it's shooting free throws or it's becoming a professional speaker, you need to get reps. So my goal was to get as many reps as I could. And I did a few dozen talks for free right out of the gate just to get the practice. I did film most of those, and I would go back and watch them. And as many young players who will tell you that watch film of them playing games, it was pretty hard to watch. It was, it was challenging. I mean, because as they say, film doesn't lie, but It was a great learning experience. As I was doing that, because I have such a strong respect and appreciation for the coaching craft, I also hired a speaking coach. I went to a group that taught people how to be better public speakers. And I learned from them, better ways to articulate and craft stories and so forth. So I got some coaching. And that was kind of the initial impetus. And then slowly over time, I felt comfortable charging fees for speaking. They were fairly nominal fees then compared to what I'm able to charge now. But people started to pay me to do this thing that I wanted to do anyway. Yes. And I just felt an immense sense of gratitude and thankfulness to do that. And then all the while, I kept organizing and curating my content. I had notebooks and notebooks full of handwritten notes from all of the basketball camps and clinics that I had attended. And I started taking all that and organizing it into digital files and Microsoft Word documents, and have a document on leadership. What is every story, nugget, and lesson that I've learned on leadership? And I would do the same thing for communication, and the same thing for culture. And I started creating this a la carte menu of content of things that I had learned through the game of basketball, as well as my own personal experiences. And I started to really organize that. And, you take the content from my previous life in basketball and the coaching that I'm learning and getting the opportunity to speak for free and watch that on film. And now I kind of created this, this little ecosystem where I was slowly improving and piecing stuff together. And I'm still doing all of that stuff to this day. I mean, I'm not coming to you from a place of mastery. I have become a much better speaker than I started, but I plan to become a much better speaker than I am at present, so I'm sticking to that script and having a blast doing it. But I didn't complicate it. I've always believed that complexity undermines execution. So I took a very simple approach. Ask the business world what they needed, figure out where I could add value to them, because that was most important, curated and organized my content, hired a coach, and then went out in the world and started practicing. And I'll continue with that recipe until I decide to do something different.
I love it, man. There's so much AGB principles in there, that always get better mindset, that I absolutely love, and I notice it in anyone that I meet, and I'm always inspired by, man. So that's just awesome. So I appreciate that. So we spent, half of our time on that. I think it would be best used to spend the rest of our time speaking directly to our three audiences, right?
Yes.
Because this is a mission that a lot of people have tried to talk me out of. Like coaches, parents, and athletes don't get along, and they're never going to come to the one community to say positive things. And I just disagree with that, because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We just have a different viewpoint of the same sport. So can we just talk about youth sports level, and let's talk to the parents, the coaches, and the athletes, and we'll start with the parents. So let's say some things that are both hold them accountable. What can parents do to improve the way they're approaching achieving their goals, and then what do coaches and athletes need to understand about the parents' point of view?
Sure. Well, outside of the work I do in the corporate space, this is the topic that I am most passionate about. As we've already discussed, I spent the first third of my life as a dedicated basketball player. Then I spent the next third of my life as a very dedicated performance coach in the game of basketball. But what we didn't mention is I'm also the proud father of 13-year-old twin sons and 11-year-old daughter. So for this last portion of my life, I've been a proud basketball parent. All three of my children play basketball. So I have seen youth basketball over the course of my entire life. I started playing basketball at 5, and I'm nearing the age of 50. And I've seen it distinctly through each of the lenses of the groups that you've just mentioned. So empowering players, coaches, and parents is something I'm very passionate about. The parents is the one where it's my opinion that there's not a lot of focus or emphasis on how parents can be better youth sports parents. There are a lot of resources to help players become better. You can go to a lot of coaching clinics and read books on how to be a better coach. And while both of those are important, I just don't think there's near as many resources to empower and encourage parents. As you mentioned at the beginning of our show, our good mutual friend, Rich Seslowski, who's been a longtime friend of mine, we're so passionate about serving youth sport parents that we co-authored a book called The Sideline. And it's basically a practical guide to help youth sports parents navigate this crazy world. And, there's a few things that stick out specifically that I would like to say to parents. And the first thing I want to say to youth parents is I am a youth sports parent. So the stuff I'm about to share now is coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of judgment. I'm not trying to be critical, and I'm certainly not trying to tell anyone else how they need to behave. I just want to share some things that have worked for me as a parent and things that I saw up close and personal as a coach and player. And as I did before, I'll lob a few overarching principles, and then you can tell me what you'd like to dive deeper on.
Sure.
The very first thing that I want to encourage youth sports parents to do is to leave the referees alone. Leave the officials alone. It is not your job to yell from the bleachers or the stands. It is not your job to hold them accountable. It is not your job to point out what they're doing wrong. I believe firmly players need to play, coaches need to coach, officials need to officiate, and parents need to cheer and support. As soon as any one of those groups tries to do someone else's job, then we have a problem. So as soon as parents try to take over the coaching role and yell instructions from the sideline, as soon as they try to take over the officiating role and help the referee see that they just missed a call, we're going to start to have issues. So the very first thing is I politely ask that you just leave the officials alone. The second thing I ask, I just teed up, is don't yell instructions from the sideline. Once again, that's not your primary job. The players should be listening to the coaching staff and the coaching staff only. You need to play the role as mom or dad, not as coach. And then the third thing that I think parents need to be very careful of is what we call the car ride home or the dinner that night. And be very careful that you're not saying things to undermine your son or daughter's teammates, your son or daughter's coaches, or as I've already said, to undermine the officials. If your conversation on the car ride home has anything to do with, your coach is an idiot, he should be playing you more, I can't believe Johnny never passes you the ball, he's so selfish, and you guys would have won if it wasn't for that dumb referee. Anytime you're doing those three things, you're unconsciously modeling for your child to not hold themselves fully responsible and accountable for their behavior and their outcomes. You're basically blaming, complaining, and making excuses for everyone else on why your son or daughter didn't get the results that they wanted. And I just believe as a parent, that's modeling the wrong behavior. We should be teaching our kids to have an attitude of extreme ownership, and that anytime they don't get an outcome that they'd prefer, or anytime they don't play as well as they'd like, or play as much as they'd like, or score as much as they'd like, or they don't win, don't let them blame, complain, or make excuses and point that in any other direction. They need to hold themselves fully accountable for how they were complicit in not getting what they want. And that's something I believe firmly. It's something I model and do with my children very regularly, but it's something I think a lot of very well-intentioned and very well-meaning parents do unconsciously. And they don't realize what you're doing is you're teaching your child that it's okay to blame, complain, and make excuses. And I just think as parents, collectively, we can do a much better job than that.
So I want you to know that one of my goals for this very show is to expand this panel to include a parent, a coach, an athlete, a referee, and have everyone talk at the same time. But since they're not here now, I want you to take these next follow-up questions as just me playing that role, playing devil's advocate to get more content out of you.
Yes.
So said referee is not even getting to his spots. I mean, he you know how it is. These tournament guys are having them ref 5, 6 games in a row with no break. They're tired. Parents are yelling at them. They're annoyed with them. And now they're not even walking to half court to call the foul that happened on the other end. So is your advice to the parent have anything to do with the actual efficiency of the referee?
No, I mean, really, it comes down to being principle based. I mean, we can look at this from a variety of different levels. First, let's acknowledge that in every single profession in the world, there are people that do it to an unbelievably high standard, and there are people that do it to a very low standard. And this is talking about doctors and lawyers. I mean, the best of the best. We've seen people in any profession do it to the best of their ability, and we've seen people do it to a very mediocre level. And that's just human nature. So we have to acknowledge that, yes, of course, there are going to be some referees that don't take a lot of pride in their work, that aren't hustling to be where they need to be on the court to make the right call. That's just part of human nature. What I'm asserting is it is not our job as parents to get them to change. Somebody else needs to be the one to hold them accountable. We have no more right to hold a referee accountable than that referee has the right to tell us how to parent. I mean, if a referee came off of the court and went in the stands and started telling a parent, here's what you should feed your child for dinner. Here's what time they should go to bed. Here's what movies they should be allowed to watch. I mean, parents would have their minds blown. They would say, who are you to tell me how to parent my child? And I look at it through the same lens. Who is a mom or dad sitting in the bleachers to tell a referee how to do their job? So also to the point, you just mentioned that there's a lot of referees that are incredibly overworked, and they are very much underappreciated and underpaid. It is no exaggeration that there may be a referee making almost minimum wage doing 10 games in a single day. That is hard work. So I always believe we should treat every human being with some empathy and compassion and kindness, and give them some grace. How would you feel if you were refereeing your 10th straight game in an unair conditioned gym during the summer? Is there a chance that you wouldn't be running to every spot, that you might be dogging it a little bit because you're tired? And if you have some humility, the answer to that is yes. This is a human being doing the best they can with what they've got. And yeah, it might not be ideal for me, but boy, is that easy for me to say because I'm just sitting in the bleachers. So I think if we lean in with some compassion and some empathy and some grace and some understanding, that will certainly help. And, and also keep in mind the human condition. There's not a referee on the planet that is going to start changing their behavior for the better because a parent starts yelling something from the bleachers. I mean, if anything, during a timeout, bring the referee a water and just say, man, it looks like you're really working hard out there. You must be tired. That will get you further than screaming from the bleachers and calling them lazy or telling them they missed a call. And we could do an entire hour just on parental, the way they treat officials. The other part that I always find hilarious is the only time parents yell at officials is when they think their own child or their child's team was on the wrong end of a call or a missed call. I don't see any parents yelling when their child commits a foul and the referee doesn't call it, or when their child clearly traveled with the ball, but the referee missed it. So at best, parents need to acknowledge I am heavily biased. The only calls I care about are the ones that favor my child and my child's team. So why should we trust someone that is that inherently biased? It makes absolutely no sense. But at the end of the day, if you are yelling at the referee, whether they missed the call or they're not getting to their spot, you are unconsciously teaching your child that it is okay to blame someone else. I mean, think about it. Whoever's officiating these games, like if we look at it from a very practical standpoint, there's a reason this person is officiating a 10-year-old AAU game. It's because they're not the best in the world at what they do. If they were the most accomplished and polished referees, they'd be working NBA finals. They wouldn't be working a 10-year-old AAU event. So can't we acknowledge that at a 10-year-old AAU event, the players are going to make a lot of mistakes. The coaches are going to make a lot of mistakes. And yes, even the referees are going to make a lot of mistakes because everybody's on the same level.
Yeah.
But we're not yelling at our child when they turn it over or miss a shot. So the only people as parents that we're trying to hold accountable is the referees. And for some reason, we think of those three major groups, the referees should be perfect.
Yeah.
Never mind you that my child has missed 4 layups and dribbled off their foot 5 times, but I think this referee should be perfect. And it is bewildering to me that parents look at it through that lens. We need to give them some grace.
I want our listeners to know that I decided 2 minutes ago that we are going to pivot to spend the rest of our time here because to your point that there isn't a lot of content that's directly aimed at helping parents be better parents in the sport. So let's stay there, but let's move away from the referees and let's get into coaches and into the idea that's business. So I want to cue this up with a quick story. So I've got a friend who's in Maryland, right? Who and he's got a talented young player, and they're really having a hard time finding a travel club that they can stick with, right? So they're moving around quite a bit. And then he's hearing advice that moving around is not a great idea, but he's like, what am I supposed to do? Some of these coaches are so bad. They're not taking care of my kid. They're favoring this kid, favoring that kid. So it is his money. So when you talk about American business, if I pay for something, I expect something in return. But when you talk about sport, you're a little older than me, but when we grew up, sport wasn't as much business, especially youth sports. It was you made the team, and now if the other player is better than you, you have to sit, right? But now if I paid and he paid, why am I sitting? I want to play. So how do parents navigate business and sport?
Well, the first thing is you need to decide, why do you want your child to play sports in the first place? Like, what is most important to you? And when I ask most parents that, their answer, and I don't know if they're just saying this because they think it's culturally acceptable or politically correct or whether or not they actually believe it, but they say things like, I want my kid to have fun. I want them to learn the intangibles, things like work ethic and respect and accountability. I want my kid to make friends and have new experiences. I want my child to do something that they enjoy doing and work on getting better at something. Maybe if it's something they love, that they'll want to do this, post high school, but that's the answers that they usually give. And then most of that tends to be thrown out the window when they actually start talking about the experience that they're having. They start worrying about, well, what is the team winning, and how much does their kid play, and how much does their kid get to shoot, and how many, so you're saying that you want this, but then all that you seem to care about is this. And I'm not saying that those things are mutually exclusive, but to me, as a parent, the very first thing I would get crystal clear on is, what do I want out of a coach? And I won't project. I'll just share, as a father of 13-year-old twin sons and an 11-year-old daughter, what's most important to me. For me, what's most important from a coach is someone that does create a safe and fun environment for my kids to do something they love. I want the coach to be a high character role model on and off the court, someone that treats my children with respect, and someone who demands respect in return. Someone that is very high character and does the right thing. I want a coach that loves the game of basketball and wants to teach the fundamentals the right way. They're not looking for a shortcut to win. They want to teach my children the skills of the game and how to play well with others so that they can be a part of a team. So for me, those are the 3 most important things. So I make sure that the teams my children play on and the coaches that they play for are checking those 3 boxes. Outside of those 3 boxes, yes, I want my kids to be able to have weekly practices where they can work on their craft and get better at their skills. You know, I know kids love playing games, so I hope that they play games that are fun and competitive, you know, because I do believe learning to be competitive is a very important skill. I know that my children would like to play more minutes and get more shots. They're human beings. Of course, that's natural. But we really, as their father, I de-emphasize that, because to me, that's not what's most important at their current ages. So I think a parent, before they pay their money, they need to decide what's most important. And if they decide what's most important is, I want my child playing on the most elite team that they can play for, a team that has really awesome uniforms and shoes, and a team that travels all over the world, and a team that has future college players on it, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't say that with an ounce of judgment. If that's what's most important to you, then that's your criteria to look for. I just have a problem when parents say they want one thing and then they complain about something else. So the level is also important. You know, my 3 kids at their age, I mean, they're good basketball players, but they're not elite or exceptional basketball players by any means. So I don't feel the need to put my children on an elite travel team that's going to be playing, you know, once a month in Las Vegas against the best players in the world. My kids don't need that yet. Now, maybe in a few years, they'll get to a level where that would be appropriate. But for right now, they all play in a local organization that practices twice a week for 90 minutes. Those practices are focused on fun and fundamentals and teaching the game the right way. They have local games and occasionally some regional games most weekends, and the competition is very appropriate. The coaches have chosen to keep rosters of 10 or less players so that everybody gets a little more playing time. You know, and it's not an equal opportunity. Everybody plays the same amount. You know, some of my children play more on their teams than others. And the thing I talk to them about is, if you want to play more, then you have to earn the right to play more. If you want more minutes, then you need to become a better player. I never, ever put it on the coach or blame anyone else. I look my children in the eye and say, if you want to play more, then you need to put in more work. And they understand that. And if they want to do that, they will. And if they don't, if they're content with playing much more of a reserve role because they don't want to be obsessed with the game of basketball, I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me at all. But I don't allow my children to try and have it both ways. I don't let my children, not put in extra work and then complain about not playing. You know, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. You can't have it both ways. You know, you can't have mediocre habits and lofty goals. One of them has to change. And I tell my kids the same thing. Either you need to be okay with not playing a lot of minutes and only practicing a couple times a week, or you need to devote a lot more time and attention to your craft so that you can earn the right to play more. It's your choice, and whatever you choose, I will love you and support you unconditionally, but you're not going to try to have it both ways.
I absolutely love it. We call that adding weight to your want, right? So if you think of it as a scale, whatever it is you want, that's the side you should put all your actions on. That's the side you should put all your goals on, and it'll just weigh you down and you'll have no choice but to achieve your goals. But when you just say, I want pizza, and hope that pizza arrives in 30 minutes, then, it doesn't really work. Like, careers don't work that way. That's for sure.
Yes.
So I absolutely love this, man. And I cannot believe we're getting close to our time. I could talk.
I know, this is a fun. We can always do a round 2 of this at some point. If you get good feedback on this, and if your community and your membership base is really resonating with this, happy to jump on again in the future. If you do decide to create that panel, if you think I'm a good fit for one of those positions, I'm happy to jump on. Like if any of your community writes in a bunch of questions and you want to read their questions off and have me answer them on a future episode, happy to do it. I mean, this is something I am really, really passionate about. And you can feel from my energy. And I just want to say it again. I know I said it at the beginning. It would be easy for a parent listening to this to feel that I'm being judgmental and critical of them. And I guess on some level, I am being critical of their behavior. I'm certainly in no position to ever judge another human being. And I'm certainly never here to judge another parent. I know how hard parenting is. I just want to be able to share through my lens of experience behaviors that I think would be very helpful and fruitful for parents to emulate. And I'm just trying to bring up this level of awareness. A good portion of the parents that I've spoken to in the past, they don't even realize that they're yelling at the referees to the degree that they are, or yelling instructions from the sideline. Like it's just almost an automatic default to them. And I just want to bring up the awareness that I know you have good intentions of why you're doing this, but it's actually working in the opposite direction of what you're trying to accomplish with your child. So I hope that everyone watching this understands how much I value, respect, appreciate youth sports parents. I know the sacrifices that you make of time and money to allow your children to play sports. And I'm just doing everything I can. And I know Rich feels the same way, to make this experience the best that it can possibly be. Because ultimately, every group, the coaches, the referees, and the parents, all should be doing this in service of the most important group, which are the players, which are the children. And each one of us needs to ask, are we doing everything in our power to make the youth sports experience the most positive it can be for our children? And that's really all that my passion in this subject is trying to do. Can we make this a more enjoyable and helpful and beneficial and impactful experience for the players? The vast majority of people watching this will have children that will not play past high school. I may not have children that will play past high school. Mm-hmm. So there's a very finite window on how long our children can enjoy organized and formal sports. And every year that goes by, that window starts to shrink. And I just want to make sure we're making sure that experience is the most positive that it can be.
I love it, man. And, anyone that is listening to our show should be ready for some accountability, because that's what we're all about. We believe in the power of accountability. We see it's like Scrooge McDuck diving into a thing of gold coins, man. It's where the value is. You dive in and take it. So I appreciate your time very much. Last thing, tell us where we can find you. How can we support you? Our goals are so aligned. I want all of AGB members to buy your books, get to your YouTubes. Where can we find you?
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, first, in reverse order, if you are interested in a copy of The Sideline, just go to thesidelineBook.com. Buy a copy for yourself. If you're a coach listening to this and you want to buy copies for every parent of the kids on your team, or for your entire school, organization, or club, we offer very generous bulk discounts. So thesidelineBook.com. As far as everything I do, AlanSteinJr.com is the main hub. I do have 2 books, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game. You can find those on Amazon or Audible. I'm very easily accessible and very responsive on social media, at Alan Stein Jr. On Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. So if anyone ever hears of an opportunity where they need a motivational speaker or a corporate keynote speaker, you can certainly reach out, shoot me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn, or go to the website. It'd be my honor to serve. But this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you for coming on. We're going to hold you to it, man. We are going to put that panel together, and you're going to be the first person I call. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you soon, man.
My pleasure.